Today we're sitting down with Amy Gamble, an author, professional speaker, and mental health advocate, and a former Olympian. She shares her story on what her journey was like to mental wellness.
If you have someone who is struggling with mental health, what would you say the best thing for someone to do, to support them would be? What would you tell people to say to them? How can people support their loved ones?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And it's something that's not intuitive because we don't deal with things unless we have to. If you were having a conversation with a loved one who had just recently diagnosed with cancer, you may not necessarily have all the right words, but you may go to them and say, I feel bad for you. And if there's anything I could do to help you, let me know. And I'll be there for you. And I love you. Those kinds of things. And so it's very similar when someone has a mental health condition and who's struggling. I can see that you're having a hard time and I want to be there for you. And I love you and care about you. And if there's anything that you need, let me know. If you need help, getting to the doctor or finding a referral for a therapist or a physician, let me know, and I can pull my resources and tap into my network and see if I can help you. The mental health first aid class, which I recommend that everybody take mental health first aid. It's an excellent course. It teaches people a 5-step action plan, and that 5-step action plan is assess for risk of suicide or harm, listen non-judgmentally, which is really key, giving reassurance and information. So when you know that you've been exposed to people who have mental health conditions and they've recovered, you can give that hope to someone. Maybe they're recently diagnosed with bipolar or schizophrenia or depression or anxiety. And you can give them reassurance that they're going to be okay, that they too can, they can get better, they can have a life. And then encouraging appropriate professional help. And then finally encouraging self-help and other support strategies. So those are really a key group of things that when you're trained in mental health first aid, and even if you're not, you can practice those action steps.
Another question that I wanted to ask is, let's say, for instance, I'm really struggling with anxiety right now, thinking about reaching out to someone, but I'm not really sure if I want to. What would you tell someone who is wanting to get help, thinking about getting help, but not really sure whether they want to pull the trigger on it?
I mean, I would say that it's really brave of you to come to terms with and face that you're struggling with a mental health condition, but know that you aren't alone and that there are many, many people out there who are struggling with especially anxiety. Anxiety and depression are the two most common mental health conditions. And so don't be afraid to get the help that you need. And the key is getting help as soon as the symptoms appear and not allowing that condition to get worse. Mental health conditions get worse over time if not treated. So often when someone gets diagnosed with a mental health condition or mental illness, family members and people around that circle don't know how to react and don't know how to deal with that person. And they look at that person as other and separate instead of still part of that same family unit and still that same person. They're just struggling with a mental health condition. And I've seen that a lot over the years. And it's very difficult to watch people get kind of abandoned by friends and family because they don't know what to do and because maybe they just don't want to deal with it.
That's a huge part of it. And I really like that you said we have to get to a point as a society where it's health, in general.
Yeah.
Do you want to go ahead and talk a little bit about what has worked for you in the past? Give a little bit of background, talk about the biggest challenges that you've faced.
So I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder about 20 plus years ago. It was a mental health crisis. I was given a handful of pills and out the door in 5 days of treatment. And that was it. And I didn't understand bipolar disorder. I didn't understand if I stopped taking medications, what would happen. I lived for a very long time, a bit of a roller coaster ride with getting sick and then going back to work and then getting sick again and having crises and tragic experiences. And then finally, I got to the point where my last very bad episode, I ended up lost in the wilderness for a few days and I almost died. And so that kind of shook me to my core of, I need to learn how to deal and cope with this. This is a serious illness on the spectrum of severity. I have a pretty severe case of bipolar disorder. And so coming to terms with that and accepting that was probably the first step in my wellness journey. I learned everything I possibly could about it. Not just the signs and symptoms that you read in a book, but how was it affecting me? Because so much of that mental health condition was a part of who I was. I mean, I was an athlete. I was super focused. I, became an Olympian. I kept thinking about this of how can I be so successful and have this mental health condition that you tell me that I have? Inherently in our culture, we think of mental health conditions as something of a flaw, a personality flaw, like it's our fault. I love this quote by Brene Brown that says, if you put shame into a petri dish, it needs 3 things to grow: secrecy, silence, and judgment. What happened for me is that I wanted to keep secret that I had this condition. I didn't want anybody to know. And so it made everything awkward around me. And finally, I just got to that point where I would equate it to just lying down in the stream and going with the flow and learning about it's okay. I would want people to take away from the fact that learning that it is not your fault and learning that there is no shame in having a mental health condition. And that's so important. So I manage it through, I'm very strict on my medications. I have pill boxes I use. I don't miss days of medication anymore. I watch my sleep really closely. Sometimes I have interrupted sleep. And so if that's an issue, I make sure that I try to catch up on my sleep and take care of myself.
Okay, the last main thing I want to ask is, you have been so successful. Handball Olympian, which is awesome. I played basketball in high school. And so I was like, oh, she is so cool.
Thanks.
You were in corporate America. You have, started your own platform and advocacy, and you're giving back to the community. And so where can people go to learn more about you and what you do?
You could go to amygamble.com, my website about life coaching, peer coaching, and speaking. And there's a contact form on there. So if you want to get in contact with me directly. I also wrote a book called Bipolar Disorder, My Biggest Competitor. And that's on Amazon. And that details sort of my pathway with bipolar disorder and talks of some of the tragedies that I went through to get to the other side.
Thank you. I have that on my list. I'm excited to read it, and how you have really worked so hard and accomplished so much that's so impactful for so many people who are struggling. She struggles too. It's okay to struggle.
Yeah. I think that's a great message, that I do struggle. I struggle a lot with obsessive thinking, paranoia, suspiciousness, and I have to really work my way through to healthy thinking. So I would just tell people who are struggling to never give up, because it gets easier to manage over time.